This is the story of Frank and Betty's become one and only wife and husband, and our family as we progressed. Um, First of all, I met Frank in October um, of 1945, and Frank had decided that he was going to Xavier University to complete his college education. And so he started school, and while he was there, he met Tom Sack. And in discussing with him, he found out that Tom lived only several blocks away from him. And he said, Frank, I could pick you up whenever we're in the same class and drive you back and forth to school. So that was how they met. And then after a few weeks, I'm assuming, Tom says, Frank, I have a girlfriend that has a sister. How would you like to go on a double date? And Frank said, at first, I'm not the least bit interested in girls right now. I want to get my education. So I wasn't thinking about going anywhere with girls. So he said, well, give it a thought. Maybe we could go on a double date, and it would be a night out during the weekend. On the weekend. So Frank said, well, after a while, I got to thinking that maybe the Holy Spirit kind of pushing me on ahead says, you do deserve to go out, so maybe you should go. And so they made arrangements for a double date on a specific Saturday night. And it turned out that for some reason or other, Tom and Mary couldn't actually keep that date. Something had happened in Tom's family life that he wanted to attend. So he said, in discussing the whole thing, he found out that Tom's sister was married to a man that Frank had known for a number of years, and they were buddies before they ever went into the service. And he said, I'll tell you what, I'll ask Ruth, his sister, and his wife if they will go with you and just go out with you that night. At least you won't just stand her up for a date. So I guess Frank must have thought that's fine because he did know him and that would be satisfied. So Tom gave directions on how to find our house, which was in Southgate, Kentucky, a small town in northern Kentucky, probably 10 to 12 miles away from where he lived in Cincinnati area. And he knew nothing about northern Kentucky. He never lived anywhere in northern Kentucky. But he thought, well, okay, I'll find it. He told me what to do. As he was driving over, he got lost and he couldn't find his way. And he thought, well, how do I do this? So he finally stopped in the local pharmacy, which was the one and only in the city. And he said, I'm looking for a Betty Knapp that lives on Center Street. Any way you know how to find her? Oh, he said, that's John's daughter. Specs knew everybody and everybody knew Specs. And he said, you're only a couple blocks away. I'll tell you how to do it. So he come driving up and he came up and pushed the doorbell and there stood Frank. And I guess, in retrospect, I thought, well, one of the things that Tom had told me was he was 26 and I was 19 at the time. I thought, he's older for me, But I thought, oh, well, it's a date. What the heck, So we decided we'd go, and he got me in a car, and I'm getting in a car, and I'm thinking, what do I talk to about?
Mm-hmm.
That's my first thought. how do I carry on a conversation with Frank? And because I didn't know Tom's sister or his buddy, his husband, and but he, we took the car and we crossed the bridge and we went over into Cincinnati where he was familiar. And I don't remember how late it was till we stayed out, but we had a nice evening with Ruth and Wes and with Frank. So we drove on home then that night, and he was a handsome young man, with curly black hair. And I can still remember his curly black hair. It was very nice looking. So before we left, he said, can I set another date with us one of these nights? And I said, well, I guess if you want to, it's all right with me. So we set up another date for, I don't know if it was the next weekend or when it was, but that was the beginning of our blind date. And hopefully the next time it probably was with Tom and Wes. Tom and Mary. And I felt more comfortable because it was kind of, in the first date, it was kind of three people knew each other and I was the in man out, Yeah. So it was a little different. So that's how we started. And then as time went on, he proceeds to say, well, I'm in school. I'm here to complete my education. And that's what's ultimately important to me. So he said, I will not make any arrangements for dates other than on the weekend because I won't go anywhere. I'll be studying the rest of the time. And I'll just I'll keep Saturday night open so we could do whatever we want. So that's the way our date went for quite a while. And then as time went on, he started calling me on the telephone every evening. And maybe we would spend, as we got to know a little better, we'd spend 3/4 of an hour on the phone. In fact, my family and were beginning to get a little impatient with the whole thing because we were kind of monopolizing the telephone. And in those days, we had we didn't have our own personal line in the telephone. There were two of us on that line. And I'm sure the people that was the other family were complaining they could never get the phone, that your daughters are on the phone all night. So because when I get off, Mary would be talking to Tom. And when Mary would hang up, my sister Rita would be hanging there talking with Joe. So between us, we'd spend most of the evening, and the other people on the line didn't get most of the telephone. And whenever they needed a telephone, they started complaining. But that didn't stop us. We did it anyhow. Mm-hmm. So from there, we were going on Saturday night. And then when the warmer weather came around, he said, well, let's do something on Sunday afternoon. I'm not doing on Sunday afternoon. I'll get in the car. We'll just, maybe we'll go for a ride or we'll go see this or go see that and just enjoy Sunday afternoon. So that was fine with me. I enjoyed that. And as we got to know better, well, we grew closer. And we dated regularly. And as time went on, we were going almost 2 years, I guess. He asked me to marry him. And by that time, we had grown close. And so one evening, we were at Alt Park, and he pulled the car over by the lake. Mm-hmm. And he said, I want to ask you to marry me. And I thought, yep, I guess we've been going together long enough and we can do this. We can make it work. So that's how we wound up together. So then we immediately, of course, I said to him, I came from an old-fashioned family. I said, you have to ask my dad. He will want to know that it's okay with him. that we got married.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he had grown to know him long enough then that he felt okay with it. And so that's what we did. And then we started talking about dates. And of course, Tom and Mary were kind of in the same boat. They were kind of getting more serious all the time, too. And finally, I started looking at dates, and I picked out July the 12th. And of course, Mary had picked September. She wanted September. And I guess somebody asked us, well, don't you want to have a double wedding? And I said, well, as close as we'd always been to Mary, I felt like both of us would like if we had our own wedding day,
Mm-hmm.
that we didn't have to share it with each other. Although we had very, very close, and we were extremely close until the day she died. We were always close. So, of course, she was very disappointed that the date I picked out was 2 months ahead of hers, and I was younger than she was. And at first her thought was, you're not allowed to do that, you're younger. But that didn't stop us. We did it anyhow. So we set up the day for July the 12th, 1947. And of course, that is the middle of the summer. And I was very formal girl, so I had my satin wedding dress and everything. Actually, when I picked out my gown and my veil, because the next door neighbor was a lady who was a seamstress and very talented sewer. And I guess everything I ever wore was homemade, I guess you might call it. As far as going into the store and buying things, that never occurred to me. People did that. I wasn't going to do that. So I wanted my dress made. So she said, well, give me an idea of what you would kind of look like, and we'll work on that idea. And I'll need how much yardage I would need to make it, and how I can make it. And she did exactly that. She was a little woman, but she was very talented. And I think she started out with 10 yards of satin, and she made the dress, and then she made the cap, and she built the crown on my head that went into the veil. And I was very happy with it. It was very pretty. Well, anyhow, that was satin. In the middle of July, it was hot.
Mm-hmm.
That day was hot. So we were married at 9:30 morning at our wedding. And that was a normal time of day for weddings for us. So Frank rented a Packard automobile that would hold the two of us plus the rest of the wedding party. And we had the wedding first, and after the wedding, we had a light breakfast with my Aunt Jo that lived next door, but it was primarily just coffee and coffee cake and that kind of thing, just very mild. And then Frank had arranged have a chicken dinner at Fremont Inn. So we went over there and had a big chicken dinner there. So that was nice. So a lot of our wedding pictures were taken that are in my album that were taken right there at Fremont. And of course, she had been taking pictures all through the wedding, but as far as formal pictures, they were right there at Fremont. And then we came back in the afternoon, and the first thing I did was went upstairs and took that hot dress off, to cool down a little bit and just put something on. I don't suppose I probably didn't even go downstairs. I just needed to get something cooler on. And the wedding reception was set up in the evening. And that was just in my mother and dad's home. And they had it all set up, so it was set up in the backyard with lights and food and beer and what else, you know. So, and while we was there, when it was almost time for them to come back, I put the dress back on again. And when it was time to toss the bouquet, why, I did that right there in the backyard. I don't remember who got it. It was probably Mary, I guess. I better throw it at her, you know. So, but that was the end of the day. And when